In this video, we're going to be solving quadratic equations with complex roots. Okay, so first let's recall what the quadratic formula is. It's written here, x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, and also recall that if we have the square root of negative 1, that is going to be the imaginary number I. Okay, so the a, b, and c in this problem in standard form, this is the a, the number in front of x squared, the b is the number in front of x, and the c is the number that doesn't have a variable in it. Okay, so we will write that down. A is equal to 7, b is 3, and c is 3. Okay, so now I'm going to write down the quadratic formula, but I'm going to put parentheses everywhere I see a letter, and then I'll fill in the letters at the end. So I have x is equal to negative b, so I'll put a parentheses there, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And then on bottom, and remember the line goes all the way across, okay, is going to be 2a. Okay, so now I'll input those numbers. These two are both b, so 3 and a 3 goes here. This is ac, so 7, 3. And on the bottom we have an a, which is 7. Okay, so let's simplify this. Okay, so we've got this parentheses here with a negative out front, so I can just drop it and make it a negative 3. Put the little plus or minus in there. Okay, make sure to square the entire number. Since it's positive, it doesn't matter, 3 squared is 9, but make sure if it's a negative, remember if you square a negative number, it also is positive. So 3 squared is 9. And if we multiply these three things together, negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, times 7 is negative 84. So minus 84. And then the line goes all the way across, and there's 14 on bottom, 2 times 7. Okay, so now we're going to reduce the inside of this. 9 minus 84 is going to be negative 75, so that's x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 75, so that's a negative under the square root, over 14. Okay, now we're going to split this thing up, okay, into two different fractions. Okay, we're going to put the plus or minus in between. So we're going to have negative 3 over 14, and then put the plus or minus, and then the square root of negative 75 over 14. Okay, so we split it up into two pieces. So we'll have an a plus bi. That's how you want to write when you have a complex solution. You want it to be written as a plus bi. So the real number comes first, and the number that has I in it will come second. Okay, so this one is going to have an imaginary number because we do have a square root that is a negative inside. So we're going to put an I out here on the next step. So that will be equal to negative 3 over 14 plus or minus the square root of positive 75 over 14. And then I'll put the little I right there. Okay, a plus bi. Okay, now one more thing I need to do is take care of this 75. I need to reduce it. Now remember that in order to reduce square roots, you need to use square numbers. So 2 squared is 4. Let me write these down. 2 squared is 4. 3 squared is 9. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. 6 squared is 36. 7 squared is 49. 8 squared is 64. And you could keep going. Okay, so which one of these goes into the 75 evenly? And choose the biggest one if there's more than one. So we notice 25 goes into 75 3 times. So I can write that, and I'll just write it right here inside. That square root of 75 is the same thing as the square root of 25 times 3. Okay, so the square root of 25 becomes a 5 on the outside. We square root it, excuse me, and then the 3 stays on the inside. So this square root of 75 becomes this right here. Okay, so I'm going to write down my answer now, going back to here. I have negative 3 over 14 plus or minus 5 square roots of 3 over 14 I. Okay, so these will be two different solutions, one with a plus and one with a minus. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, so we've got this time a 6x squared plus 4x minus 1 equals 0. And recall that the square root of negative 1 equals I. Here's the quadratic formula. Okay, so this time we have A is equal to 6, B is equal to 4, and C is equal to -1. Okay, so let's write down X is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over one big line 2a. Okay, so let's input those numbers. This is a 4 because these are both b's, and then we have ac, so 6, -1, and then on bottom we have a, which is 6. Okay, so let's reduce that and simplify it a little. We can drop this parentheses and just make that a -4. Okay, and then plus or minus the square root. 4 squared is 16. And then if I multiply this through, the -4 and the -1 become +4, and 4 times 6 is 24, so plus 24. This becomes plus because the two negatives cancel each other out. Okay, and then on bottom we have a 12, 2 times 6. Okay, so when we add those two together on the inside of the square root, we get this, -4 plus or minus the square root of 40 over 12. Okay, now since this is a positive square root, it's not going to have an I this time. So if you want, you could keep it all as one fraction, but I'm going to write it the same way as I did the complex ones. So I'm going to split this up into two fractions. It would be -4 over 12 plus or minus the square root of 40 over 12. Okay, so we don't have an I, but we do need to reduce that square root of 40. Remember your square numbers. Let me write them down real quick. 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, and 25, 36, 49, and so on. Okay, which one of those goes in evenly? Pick the biggest one if there's more than one. Looks like the only one that goes in is 4. 4 times 10 gives you 40. Okay, so the square root of 40 becomes the square root of 4 times 10. You square root the 4 out and it becomes 2 on the outside when it comes out. And what stays underneath? The 10. Okay, so let's go back over here. We have, let's reduce this fraction. -4 over 12. Divide the top and bottom by 3, so it would be -1 over 3. Plus or minus 2 square roots of 10. That's what we figured out the square root of 40 was. Divided by 12. We need to do one more thing here. We need to reduce this fraction as well. So we've got not inside, like the 10, since it's underneath the square root, don't mess with that. Like it stays, it's done. But look at the 2 and the 12 and see, is there anything that goes into both of those? And a 2 does, so let's reduce that fraction by dividing by 2. And our final answer will be -1 over 3 plus or minus. The 2 goes away here, so it's just square root of 10 on top, and on bottom we have a 6. So there you go. And if you need to write it separately, just do one with a plus sign and one with a minus sign. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, on this one we have 5x squared minus 5x plus 2. So our a is equal to the 5. Our b is equal to -5. And our c is equal to 2. Okay, so let's write down the quadratic formula. -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay, so let's put those numbers in there. These are both b's, so -5 and a -5. Okay, and then this is ac, so a is 5, c is 2, and then on bottom we have 2a, so we'll put a 5 there. Okay, so let's clean that up. The negative out here becomes a positive, so that's a +5. Square root. If you square -5, it's still going to be positive, right? Because -5 times -5 is a +25. So be careful about that. And then if we multiply these through, we should get a 40. So that's our -40. -8 times 5 is -40. So -40. And then on bottom, it looks like we have a 10. Okay, so let's reduce the inside of that square root. So it's equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of -15 over 10. Okay, so now we're going to split this up into two fractions, one with the 5 on top and one with the square root of -15 on top. So 5 over 10, it's your first fraction, plus or minus square root of -15 over 10. Okay, this one does have a negative under the square root, so we are going to get rid of the negative, and we're going to put an I right here out in front of this fraction, or out behind this fraction, excuse me. So 5 over 10, let's reduce that real quick. 5 over 10, if we divide top and bottom by 5, becomes 1 over 2, so 1/2. Plus or minus the square root of 15. It's positive now over 10 because we're putting an I out front. Okay, let's see if that square root of 15 can be reduced. Our square numbers, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16. It's already bigger than the number inside. 4 and 9, neither one of them divide evenly into 15. That tells us that this is our final answer. Negative 1/2 plus square root of 15 over 10I, and negative 1 minus square root of 15 over 10I. Okay, one more. Okay, on this one we have 3x squared minus 2x plus 5. So our A is going to be the 3. Our B is going to be negative 2. And our C is going to be 5. So let's write out the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Okay, let's fill it in. So the first two things are B, so negative 2 here and a negative 2 here. And then AC, so 3 and a 5. And on bottom we have 2A, so there's a 3. All right, let's simplify this. So the negative and the negative on the 2 become a positive 2, plus or minus the square root. Negative 2 squared is a positive 4. Okay, and if we multiply all this stuff up, let's see, it'd be negative 4 times 3, which is negative 12. And then negative 12 times 5 is negative 60. So 4 minus 60 is what's underneath the square root. And on bottom we have 6. Okay, so 4 minus 60 is negative 56. So we get 2 plus or minus square root of negative 56 over 6. Okay, at this point I'm going to split it up into two fractions. So I get 2 over 6, that's 2 divided by 6, and then the square root over 6. Put the plus minus in the middle. So square root of negative 56 over 6. Okay. Now, since this is a negative underneath the square root, on the next step, I can say, well, first of all, let's reduce that fraction. Keep forgetting to do that, but let's do that. So we divide the top and bottom by 2, so that first fraction becomes 1 over 3 instead of 2 over 6. Okay, and then we have the square root of positive 56 over 6, and then we put the I, the imaginary number, out there. Okay, let's see if the square root of 56 can be simplified. So our square numbers are 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, and so on. Okay, so it looks like the only one that's going to go in evenly is this 4. 4 goes into 56 14 times. So let me write it out here. The square root of 56 is equal to the same thing as 4 times 14. Okay, these two things multiply to get 56. We can square root out that 4, so it becomes a 2 in the front, and the 14, nothing happens to it. And the 14, again, is not divisible by any of these numbers, so you can't reduce it further. Okay, so that's what I'm going to replace this with in my next step. So here's the 1/3 plus or minus. Instead of square root of 56, I'm going to write 2 square roots of 14. And then I'm going to divide by the 6. One more step. I need to look at this 2 and the 6, not the square root. That one gets left alone, but the 2 and the 6, I can divide both of those by 2. So let's reduce that fraction like that. And my final answer is 1/3 plus or minus the square root of 14. The 2 goes away, it cancels. And then 6 divided by 2 is 3. And that's my final answer. And that's it.